Welcome to Financial Issues, where we join reality with truth, helping you make the most of your money by honoring God with your investments. Now listen in as we give you the practical tools and advice you need to become a biblically responsible investor.
Good morning. Welcome to Financial Issues. We're so glad that you tuned in this morning. Financial Issues is a ministry that helps to educate people about financial issues from a biblical worldview. So we talk about all the things that are happening in the market, in the economy, and the world around us, and we filter that through a biblical lens, remembering and reminding you what it says in the scriptures about how we should handle our finances. And for just $132 a year, you can be a partner with this ministry. You'll get access to asset allocation models and a buy list. You'll be alerted of sales when you become your own portfolio manager, because your heart is convicted to keep your money out of the kingdom of darkness. So our main goal is to screen companies, that publicly traded companies that are using shareholder dollars to fund dark agendas, and help you to defund the light, keep your money out of those areas. Speaking of the partners, we do have a partner conference call tomorrow. So at noon Central Time, 1 Eastern Time, you should have gotten or will be getting an email with the details on how to join that partner conference call. If you didn't get it yet, or maybe it went to your junk folder or something, you can always find the information by logging into the partner side of the website and going to the conference call tab. You'll be able to listen to the most recent conference call, and you'll find the phone number there with instructions on how to join the upcoming conference call. Our phone lines are open, or at least they will be shortly if they're not. If you've got a question, you can give us a call, 610-363-1110. I don't know if my screen's lagging or not, but it shows the phones are still closed. So if you're trying to call, they're open. If you're trying to call, try again now. You should be successful. On today's show, we are going to get to your calls and your questions. So 610-363-1110 is the phone number to do that. You will be the very first person in the call queue. We're also going to get to the latest economic information, get you caught up on what's happening in the markets ahead of today's FOMC interest rate decision. We're also, of course, going to get some encouragement from the scriptures. Today will be in Joshua 22:5. So don't forget, mark your calendar for the partner conference call tomorrow. That's Thursday, March the 20th at noon Central Time. Well, after two positive sessions for the equity markets that were appearing to lead the markets out of correction territory, all three indices retreated yesterday. So the Dow was down 0.6%. The S&P 500 shed a little bit more than 1%, ending the day over 8.5% below its February record close. The NASDAQ declined 1.7%, and the major contributors to that sell-off were Tesla, Palantir, and NVIDIA, all for pretty company or trend-related reasons. The pre-markets this morning were indicating a negative open on the cusp of the Fed rate decision. Now they are in positive territory. So all three, well, the Dow's indicated to open right above the flat line, the S&P up 0.2%, and the NASDAQ up 0.3%. So it'll probably be a much different picture one way or another by the end of the trading day, because we will hear from Jay Powell about their interest rate decision at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Is when he'll report the decision along with their prepared statement, followed by a press conference. So I think the consensus is very much widely in the camp that they will leave interest rates unchanged this meeting. I'm in that camp as well. But what's going to move the markets, or what has potential to move the markets today, is their summary of economic projections. So once a quarter, the Fed reveals their dot plot, which is where they have all of the members of the Fed give their predictions on where interest rates are going, where inflation is going, and where GDP is going. So we'll get to take a look at that data later today as well, and I'll be parsing through that for the next couple of days and give you my interpretation of what was said and what was released. So the Fed will be very dependent on the data that's coming out, as they always say that they are. So we'll take a look at that. Interestingly enough, BlackRock's chief investment officer of global fixed income and head of the firm's global allocation investment team, in a phone interview, said this: at any given price, the depth of the market is amazingly thin, he said, adding that's more than the case in stocks than bonds. The prices on the screen seem liquid, but the depth of education at any price point is amazingly shallow. Well, what does that mean? What it means to me. So market depth is a measure of liquidity. So how much buy and sell interest exists at various price levels. So you have to remember that the market is called a market because that's where people go to trade stocks, to buy and to sell. And so on the floor, and most of this is done electronically now, but you have people who are making offers to sell the stock that they have, and people or institutions that are making offers to buy the stock that is being sold, and they put in what price they want to pay. So if you put in a market order, you're just going to say, hey, I'm going to pay the price of whatever the going price is. But, big institutions will often use limit orders and such. And so, there's some transparency about how many buyers and sellers are in there at different levels, and big institutions are typically placing a lot of money at one time, which has the potential to move the markets. So when someone comes out and says the depth of the market is amazingly thin, they mean that there are not many orders that are stacked up at different price levels. So this makes it difficult to execute large trades without moving the price of the stock one way or the other. What this tells me is that institutional traders are somewhat paralyzed right now from putting money to work, because big trades would likely set off big moves in the market, either up or down, depending which way they're going. So if institutions make market-moving trades by placing a lot of money when there's not a lot of liquidity out there, we risk triggering the bots. Which is exactly what JP Morgan analysts are saying caused the most recent stock market correction. So they said this: the recent U.S. equity market correction appears to be more driven by equity quant function position adjustments and less driven by fundamental or discretionary managers reassessing U.S. recession risk. So quant trading is trading decisions that are made by mathematical models, the algorithms that you hear, statistical techniques. And so, the goal of quant trading really tries to take the human decision-making process or the emotion out of trade decisions, and it looks strictly at the data. It's very data dependent. So it takes human reasoning out of the picture altogether. So, I'm not a fan of that type of investing. I still think that there's a human element that needs to come into play. You have to look at the facts, and then you have to make some assumptions about what the future looks like. Now, assumptions can be right and assumptions can be wrong, but if you're making a real educated guess, then you have to use the information that you have available to make the best decision that you can. So when we're doing analytics, when we're talking about companies that are going on the buy list or the sell list, I look at quant ratings, just because they're right there next to the data that I'm looking at. They're interesting, but they don't factor into the decision-making process for us at all. Most of the time, the quant rating tends to be somewhat contrary to the decision that we land on. So there is in the markets a low conviction right now until Trump economic policies gain footing and have a chance to work. So this will take some time. We might not see the fruit of these efforts until possibly late this year, maybe even into next year. And a recent Wall Street polls indicate that stagflation fears by analysts is what's holding the market down. So coming up on a break here, I'm going to have to hold these thoughts over to the next segment. So our phone lines are open, folks. There's nobody in the call queue yet, so if you've got a question, you'll be the first caller in. 610-363-1110 is the phone number to call. So you'll be the first caller in the queue. I'm your host, Shana Burt. Stay tuned. We'll be back with more financial issues.
How is Timothy Plan continuing to lead the fight as you guys now enter your fourth decade of leading this fight of biblically responsible investing?
We've been too silent for too long, and we can no longer be silent. You stand up, like Ronald Reagan said, we're only one generation away from losing all of our liberty. Yeah. It has to be fought for. I wish it didn't. And you can fight for it. You don't need guns and ammunition and that. You can fight for it, especially with your dollars, because it's always about the money. And when the money starts impacting people, they start paying attention. When we launched this, they said it couldn't be done, but here we are 30 years later. They said you couldn't get competitive returns, but here we are.
What a tremendous testament of God's grace.
Go to financialissues.org/Timothy Plans to learn more about Timothy Plan.
My name is Reagan Gardner, and I am in the 4th grade. Last year, I thought I had to act different, look different, and be different to be cool. When I joined Crossroads, I learned that God loves me just the way that I am.
Help reach more kids like Reagan with the hope of the gospel. To learn more about Crossroads Kids Club and how you can get involved, visit reachourschools.com.
Hearing Jesus say, "Well done," how to secure your rewards in heaven. Don't you want to be sure that when you get there, that you're going to have the best life forever? And that best life forever is being able to access the plethora of wonderful, escalating rewards that are elucidated throughout the book of Revelation to those who overcome. Well, that's what the book's about, friend.
Order your copy of Hearing Jesus Say Well Done today on Amazon and start living for what truly matters.
Securities offered through G.A. Reppel & Company, a registered broker-dealer and investment advisor, member FINRA and SIPC. Opinions expressed by Shana are hers alone and are for informational purposes only and do not necessarily represent those of G.A. Reppel or the outlet on which you are listening. You should consider how the information applies to your situation prior to personally implementing it and consult any financial professional you work with to make sure it's applicable to your financial plan.
Welcome back to Financial Issues. 610-363-1110 is the phone number. Our call queue is wide open, so if you've got a question, you'll be the first caller in. You will need to get that number dialed in the next 60 to 120 seconds if you want to make sure that you get in today. So 610
the heat is on, Shana.
363-1110. So we're ready for your call. I'm going to finish up my thoughts now. We were talking about the markets, what's going on, markets, economy. We have experienced a little bit of a correction. We're technically out of correction territory at this point, but it's sort of touch and go. The markets are a little bit shaky right now, trying to gain footing on how everything is going to shake out with tariffs, with the reconciliation bill, with the geopolitical turmoil that's happening in the world and all of the things that are happening. But, it's maybe the events are a little bit different, but there's always been something going on. I've been in this industry for over 25 years now, and as far back as I can remember, there was never a time when there was nothing to worry about, but as Christians, we're called to not worry about anything, right? So, but just to look at the things that are going on around us and make educated decisions about what course to take. So recent Wall Street polls indicate that stagflation fears is what has been holding the market down. So stagflation is an environment where we see high or higher than average inflation with low growth or lower than desired growth. So inflation is sticky, and it has been for quite a while now because of the massive amounts of government stimulus that was injected into the economy starting with COVID, and then added to by the Biden administration's drunken sailor spending spree that they got through Congress post-COVID that was supposed to reduce inflation and different things like that. But anyway, the inflation is sticky because of the massive amounts of government spending that has not worked its way all the way out of the system. So case in point, there's a new study from the Cato Institute that suggests that former President Joe Biden's so-called Inflation Reduction Act of 2022 could end up costing taxpayers $4.67 trillion by 2050. So you can really get the idea here that when things go through Congress, when Congress passes legislation that allocates money, because Congress does control the purse strings of our system, it takes time for that money to work its way in. So the bill allows for the spending, but the spending gets injected into the economy or gets spent at different times. So the $4.67 trillion that the Cato Institute now estimates that the Inflation Reduction Act, which had nothing to do with inflation, it did have a lot to do with inflation, but not what the intended label said, not legislate inflation away. And government spending ends up as inflation, no matter how you cut it. And we're seeing the proof of this happen right before our eyes, or we've seen it and we're continuing to see it. So the $4.67 trillion now estimated is roughly 12 times the CBO's original estimate of how much this bill was going to cost. So the Congressional Budget Office originally estimated that this bill would cost $369 billion. The real number the Cato Institute is saying now, $4.67 trillion. That's bad. That's a big, big miss. So the study says the estimate is substantial because several of the IRA's largest subsidies are uncapped. So, we have this dynamic going on. This is a holdover. This is a gift from the Biden administration. And I say gift sort of tongue-in-cheek, but, this is a landmine really set by the Biden administration that the Trump team is trying to navigate. So if most of the tariffs stick, and they aren't even set to go into place for a couple more weeks, but, we likely could see a one-time price adjustment on some things, whichever things are getting tariffs. So it's not going to be an across the board, if we have 25% tariffs, we're not going to see a 25% increase to inflation. And theoretically, if we did, that one-time price adjustment, it's going to take a little bit of time, likely a year, to work its way through the system because, you have that baseline. The baseline, you're always looking at year-over-year inflation, so you're comparing it to where it was a year ago. So if you have that a year season of increased inflation, it takes a year to work through that. We saw that after 2022 when we saw inflation at the highest that it's been in a really long time. So growth, though, GDP has held up so far. Growth could appear to stall, though, while we get our body composition right. So I keep going back to this analogy of losing weight because what we're seeing, the potential potential to economic policies is a shift from public sector fueled growth to private sector growth. During the Biden administration, GDP was sort of bought because you had one of the things that goes into the calculation of GDP is government salaries. So now DOGE is uncovering all of these government salaries that may be paying for nothing. Maybe people that don't even really exist, or maybe people that are not really doing anything. Nobody's checking on their progress. Nobody's checking to make sure that they're working until now. So all of this money is being paid, the salaries are being paid, but what is it producing? Even if you do have people who are working, there is a big difference between being busy and being productive. So, you can dig ditches and then go back and fill them in, but what does it produce? Nothing except a salary to someone to do something totally unimportant. So we're, again, with this analogy of losing weight, it's like comparing two people who weigh the same amount. So, you could compare an economy that has the same growth, but when you dig a little bit deeper, maybe one economy is being fueled by taxpayer dollars buying GDP, and versus an economy where ingenuity and hard work are the things that are contributing to the output. That's real productivity. That's real growth. So you compare two people who weigh the same amount, the person with more muscle is healthier. Everybody knows that. So that's kind of hoping that our economy shapes up to be one that is losing a bunch of fat and gaining muscle. So we want to see the small business community rebound and recover. We want to see, American ingenuity and hard work be the reasons that our economy grows, not because people are getting universal basic income or handouts from the government, and when they could be productive members of society. A Bank of America report on consumer spending says that though consumer confidence, so we hear several reports on consumer confidence throughout the month, and what the consumer confidence is what consumers say they think about the economy, how optimistic or pessimistic they are about the future that's coming. So a lot of consumer confidence surveys have said that consumer confidence is waning, that consumers are becoming more pessimistic. But if you look at the behavior, now Bank of America serves 1 out of every 2 households, and they have their finger on the pulse of about $4 trillion worth of consumer spending. So Bank of America says that even though, they may be saying that they're a little bit pessimistic, they're still spending money. And they're spending money at levels that are 6% higher than a year ago. So this is good news because we are still a consumer-driven economy. All right, let's shift a little bit. I want to remind you that the website is going to be launching next week. Make sure you print off your data. Make sure that you know that your password. So Wednesday is the target for the release. We'll have some downtime in the 2 days prior to that. So be ready, be prepared. If there's things that you need to do, work on getting those done here very quickly by the end of the week. The stewardship verse today comes from Joshua 22:5. But take careful heed to do the command and the law which Moses, the servant of the Lord, commanded you, to love the Lord your God, to walk in his ways, to keep his commands, to hold fast to him, and to serve him with all your heart and with all your soul. So this was a command and sort of a warning that Joshua gave to the 2.5 tribes of Israel that chose to settle outside of the promised land as God described the promised land. When they were returning home, they were going to be returning home outside of the promised land after they helped the rest of the tribes conquer Canaan. So, the advice that we get here and the warning that we get here in the scriptures, even though it's from long, long ago, is great advice no matter where we find ourselves. So it's a great example of how believers then and even now can sometimes settle for less than God's best because something may seem more practical or more desirable at the moment. So while God may permit it, God permits us to choose things that are different than what he says are good for us. It can lead to spiritual challenges in the long run. So although these 2.5 tribes, their choice of land was permitted, even though it was outside the promised land, it did a couple of things. It distanced them from the rest of Israel and made them more vulnerable to spiritual attacks and physical attacks. They were separated from the center of worship, which was the temple, which is a warning that we get too, not to forsake the assembling of ourselves with fellow believers in corporate worship. They were closer to the world and the influences of the world. So is it a coincidence that they were among the first tribes to be taken into exile? So let me leave you with this question. Though choosing secular ways of investing might be permissible by the Lord, is it God's best plan for us? Check out our biblically responsible investing strategy by going to financialissues.org. Stay tuned.
Where's Mima? We found out Shepard's diagnosis when I was about 17 weeks pregnant. We learned that he was going to need a series of surgeries after he was born in order to give him what they considered a normal life. And we weren't sure how this worked.
Yeah, very emotional, very, very broken. And as my wife just said, not sure how this worked. And called Samaritan, and they said, you just go have that baby. You leave the rest to us.
And just to hear the confidence on the other end of the phone of this is not something that you need to be concerned about at all. You focus on the health of your family, the health of your baby, and we will walk with you every step of the way.
I just love the first book of Exodus. The king says the Jews are too many. Get rid of them. I command you to kill the firstborn. But the midwives to the Hebrews heard the order, and what did they do? They defied it. And God dealt favorably with the midwives and gave them families. He blessed them for loving life. He blessed them for saving babies. We have re-entered the death cult in this country. You think about how much we elevate death, whether it be the chopping off of parts and we call it transgender care, whether it be shouting our abortion, and you see it so beautifully in John 10:10. It is the divide of the entire scriptures. Now, most people would say John 3:16, but think about it. The enemy has come to lie, steal, cheat, and destroy. I have come to give life and life more abundantly. That's the whole ball game, everybody. It is everything. And we have to have the joy of Jesus Christ to enjoy life and to protect it. It's a gift from above. And Preborn is leading the charge.
What separates Crossroads Kids Club from other ministries to reach school-age children? What sets you guys apart?
First of all is our connection with local churches. We mobilize, equip, train, support local church partners. We're right inside the schools. There's a number of ministries that try to serve public school children outside of the school, but we're able to be right there on the campus. Another key thing is just our values. Our highest value is actually relationships. And so we're not a ministry that's driven by a lot of fancy technology or flashy stuff, but rather getting adults who love Jesus and who love kids to sit on the floor with a group of kids, to listen to them, to love them. So I would say the relational emphasis and the simplicity of the model is actually something that makes Crossroads special as well.
Help reach kids with the hope of the gospel. Visit reachOurschools.com.
It's great to be here with you all on Financial Issues. Thanks for joining us today for the show, and welcome back to all of you from that break. Folks, we have an interesting, teachable topic to talk about here having to do with housing. But before we get to that, I just want to remind you, from time to time, it's always good to be reminded who we are. And so let me just remind you who we are here at Financial Issues in case you have forgotten or you're new or you don't understand who we are. We're long-term. So our strategy that we offer is long-term, 8 to 15 years of investing in the market. We're not day traders. We're not looking to make a quick buck. If you are not someone who's willing to invest long-term, it might not be a good idea for you to use us. We do believe that the long-term model is the way to go. That's the way to invest well and to be successful at it. So if that is you, might be time for you to consider using the Financial Issues model in your investing. You can check it out at financialissues.org, of course. Also, we're diversified. Means we're not beholden to one company, one sector. There's broad diversification that can carry you through the ups and downs. When one sector goes up or a company goes up, another one might be going down. You're not going to be too pulled by the highs and lows. Of course, we all love it when things go up, but it's almost guaranteed that if something's going up, something else might be going down. So it's a good reminder for you to not be beholden to one sector or one company. We're diversified. And you can use our asset allocation models and our portfolio tracker to be able to find out more and to see how well diversified you are. All that is part of our partnership, of course. Also, we're boring. That might sound like a bad thing, but trust me, it's not. We're boring in the sense that we try to minimize risk as much as possible. There will always be risk in investing, but we are not in the business of taking foolish risks. We believe that your money is simply too valuable for that. Our strategy is built so that anybody can do it. You pick your asset allocation model. You pick the stocks that work for you from our buy list, and you set it up and you keep an eye on it. It's a do-it-yourself strategy, though. It's not one where you have to be constantly worried about the markets and doing trading every day and all that sort of thing. You follow the advice on the show. You stay alert for the commentaries, partner commentaries. You listen to the partner conference calls. You ask Shana questions. You call into the show. But otherwise, you set it and you let it go, and you try to be a good steward of it, and you're in it for the long term as well. We believe that that's a great way to do it. We try to minimize the risk as much as possible. We can't take it away. There's always risk in investing, and it's worth saying that there is a relationship between risk and return, but we do want you to take wise risks with your money. So also, it's slow growth, and that's related to this as well. The scripture tells us a man grows his wealth little by little. Little by little. That means we're growing it over a set period, over a long period of time for years. We're not looking to grow it quickly in a week. We're looking to grow it for a lifetime, years and years. Wealth gained hastily will dwindle, the scripture says, but a man grows his wealth little by little. Do not get discouraged if you don't see real serious growth in even the first couple weeks, couple months, even couple years. You might not see that growth until several years in, and that is okay. It might take years for you to really start to see the difference there. If you look at your children from today to yesterday, you probably won't see any difference. But if you look at your children from when they were born to today, you can see a lot of growth there. It's that same idea. And finally, the most important part about us is we're biblically responsible. The most important part of our strategy, it's a values-based investment approach where we screen out companies that dishonor God with shareholder money. If their money is involved in abortion, pornography, gambling, human rights abuses, all different sorts of things like that, anti-family entertainment, the LGBTQ nonsense, all that stuff, our money stays out of it. So we do not recommend investing in companies that partake in those sort of things. We screen out our companies so that you can really honor God with the money that He's given you. That's what we try to do. So that's a little bit who we are. Now to today's teachable moment, a little bit of housing help, housing hints here. So that's kind of the theme for today. Shana answers a great question here with a listener just about managing an inherited house. Here's that question and Shana's answer. This is a question from Bob. He's 72 years old, and he's asking, years back, my brother and I moved mom's assets into a trust to avoid a 5-year look back if necessary. Also, we put her house into our ownership / hers until she passed. Well, she passed last year at age 93. What guidance or recommendation could you give us for what to do with this house? Taxes will go up this year, I know. My brother's 5 years younger than me. What insight would you have for Bob here, Shana?
Well, I would say to look, first at what are the options before you? What are you leaning toward? Do either of you want the home either to live in or as an income asset, like to have a piece of rental property that you can rent out? If so, does the one who wants it have the resources to buy the other one out, or do you want to become business partners? You would have an ongoing responsibility for paying the taxes, doing the repairs and maintenance on the house. Is this something with which you want to share responsibility with your brother? I mean, you know probably a little bit about his fiscal responsibility. You won't be able to force him to pay the taxes or to pay for repairs or things like that. But if he doesn't, you're either going to have to make the choice to pay for them by yourself, or if you're not paying the taxes, you can face actually losing the home altogether. The taxing jurisdiction won't care that your brother is half owner. All they'll know is that the full bill isn't getting paid if it doesn't. So if one of you has no means to buy it out, either with cash, other inheritance assets, or through financing, does one or the other want to finance it for the other? If so, then you've got to make sure that there's a legal contract regarding the lien against the portion that is being financed. I mean, you don't want to end up in a legal battle with your brother's heirs if something were to happen to him. If you sell it, you will likely have capital gains. So depending on your share of ownership of the home, your cost basis may be a little bit harder to calculate. The portion of the home that still belonged to your mom at death, that part of it was likely considered an inheritance, and you could get a stepped up cost basis on that part. But depending on, how that transfer was done whenever you moved it out of, or at least part of it out of her name and into yours, that could, or very likely was considered a gift at that time. And that gift of the portion of ownership of the house also came with the parents' original cost basis. So you will probably need a tax professional to help you calculate an accurate cost basis. Once you've kind of explored all of those decisions, I would imagine that the question is going to be really narrowed down to only maybe one or a couple of options.
Yeah, it's really good, Shana. That's helpful there. And as we're thinking through this, what about some of the other rules and regulations for a house that's been inherited upon the death of the previous owner? What else do we need to know?
Well, I think that cost basis question is a big question, and I think for most people they intend just to help, and they think that it's going to make the passage easier by having their names on it. But you also have to consider whether or not you're exceeding any gift tax limitations or rules. You might be creating an unintended gift tax when you just add someone onto your deed or get added onto someone's deed. By law, any gift exceeding a certain amount, which is $18,000 in 2024 per recipient per year, must be reported to the IRS and could potentially trigger a gift tax liability. So adding a relative to your deed could be considered a gift, and this could result in higher taxes that you would need to pay. A better option may just be to put some kind of TOD designation, which stands for transfer on death, and that could help preserve, or it could prevent preserving the cost basis and actually give you a better cost basis when the property truly passes to you.
Yeah, it's helpful stuff. You just mentioned this, Shana, but any other capital gains tax limitations, other tax things we should consider if something like this happens?
Yeah, the step up in cost basis is really a great thing right now, because when you truly inherit, when you didn't own it before and you come into ownership because of the passing of a parent or a relative, then you get, and it's not just you don't have to be related, but you get a step up in cost basis to whatever the market value is on the day that they passed. So if they've owned the house for a really long time and their cost basis is low, that helps you to avoid a potential capital gains situation.
Yeah, awesome. And I think this might be the last question we have time for in this segment, but what about some pitfalls to look out when we're attempting to transfer assets to the next generation?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, you have sort of a loss of control of those assets. I mean, if you share ownership with someone, you may trust your kids, and your kids may be trustworthy, and all of that would never do anything to against your wishes, but you legally lose partial control over the assets. You're also could be subject to the credit issues of the person that you're sharing ownership with. So, if your kids or liability, what if the person that you added is texting and driving, gets in a wreck, and kills the breadwinner of a family, and they only carry the minimum liability protection on their auto policy, or worse, accidentally let their coverage lapse? Then their liability could become a real burden to you, because you typically can't lose a primary home from legal judgments or to creditors, but other property could be subject to being taken.
Hopefully, folks, that could be encouraging for you. We'll try to make some sense of a little bit of this in the next segment here, and we'll hear from Shana once more, also with more of that real estate advice as well. Home ownership, something that all of us have to reckon with at some point, I'm sure, in some way or another. We got more financial issues coming up, folks, right after this break. We'll be back after this. Stay tuned.
It's up to us to stand up and say, enough is enough. All of this unbiblical stuff that's going on, whether it's abortion or transsexual or LGBTQ, widespread pornography, human trafficking. Bottom line, it's still up to us. If we stop investing in these corporations that are trying to destroy us, sooner or later they're going to wake up.
To learn more about biblically responsible mutual funds and ETFs, go to timothyplan.com.
If a woman sees her baby on ultrasound, it doubles the likelihood that she'll choose life. On top of that, we share the gospel of Jesus Christ with her. This is why you should support preborn.
Then they sat me down. If you were to die today, do you think you would go to heaven? And I was like, no. Keeping the child was my first stepping stone. And ever since then, God has cleaned me up from the inside out.
Help support women in need. Go to preborn.com/FISM.
Every day, kids all across America are coming to school with some kind of hidden pain.
I've seen kids come in who are just so confused about what's right and what's wrong, just having no idea that God loves them. And this just breaks my heart. Crossroads has the opportunity to bring the Word of God right into the public school, to reach children right where they are.
And when we see that happen, we see God changing lives.
We want to see kids not only come to Christ, but pursue a lifelong relationship with Him. And so local churches are uniquely positioned to disciple those children as they become young adults and through their lifespan.
Crossroads comes alongside a church and provides that church with a club structure, curriculum, training, and ongoing coaching for them to run these outreaches in public schools.
If you are burdened for the children of America, consider making a donation to Crossroads Kids Club. For more information, visit reachOurSchools.com. That's reachOurSchools.com.
The opinions and recommendations expressed on this program do not necessarily represent the opinions of the station or any of the program sponsors. Additionally, all products or services offered by the program sponsors may not be known by the program.
Thanks for joining us here on Financial Issues, folks. Our show today brought to you in part by our friends over at Crossroads Kids Club. We love the work that Crossroads is doing, reaching children for the gospel in public schools. Crossroads sets up kids clubs in various public schools throughout the country, but they need your help. They need your support. If you're someone who can give financially or might even consider helping to start a club in your region, Crossroads would be a great thing for you to consider. You can find out more by going to reachOurSchools.com. Again, that is reachOurSchools.com for Crossroads Kids Club. Let's get back to our content here, folks. Shana addresses a caller in this clip here, just looking for some real estate advice. So if you're in this position, this could be really good for you to listen. Here is Shana with this caller talking about real estate.
I'm an only child, and my mom and dad have two properties. One is their primary residence, and one is a rental property. Neither one of them have a mortgage on them. So I didn't know. I will inherit these properties when both of my parents pass, so transfer on death. But explain cost basis. That terminology confuses me.
Yeah. So whenever you sell a capital asset that's not that is not privileged to some kind of special tax treatment, like if you own stocks in an IRA or a Roth IRA, that's a different thing. But if you just own assets outright, like homes, like rental property, like stocks and just regular accounts, then you have what's called a cost basis. That's it's a little bit more complicated than this, but it's basically whatever you paid for it plus any improvements that you've made to it. So it's most straightforward with stocks. You really basically just look at what you paid for it. Then when you sell it, depending on how long you've owned it, the taxes are different. You have to pay taxes on the gains, but if it's a short-term gain, meaning that you've owned it for less than a year, the gain part, not the whole thing, but the gain part is taxed at your ordinary income tax rate. If you actually have a loss on it, you're able to offset your income by $3,000 and then carry that loss forward if there's more than that for like 5 years. If you've owned the property for longer than a year, then you're subject to the capital gains, long-term capital gains rates, which are tied to whatever tax bracket you're in. If you're in the 12% tax bracket, then your capital gains rate is actually 0. For most people, they're going to pay a 15% capital gains tax on the gain part. Unless you're in a really high tax bracket, then you're going to pay a 20% capital gain and probably another 3% or so in net investment tax. So anytime that you make money on the sale of capital assets, property, this includes crypto as well. So there's a lot of things that fall into that. It includes gold for most purposes, metals, all of those things. So you have to file that on your taxes and pay tax on it. Now, when you inherit those kinds of assets, you get what's called a step up in cost basis. And so the cost basis then becomes whatever the value, in your case, whatever the value of those properties are on the day that they pass, the day that that the owners pass and the ownership goes to you. So then if you sell them immediately, you essentially have no capital gains tax on them.
Well, I think it's going to be an individualized answer now that I'm hearing more information. And I think I need to have an estate planner or tax estate planner.
Maybe so. I mean, I would just, the best person to ask probably would be either your tax person or your parents' tax person. But, as long as there's not any extenuating circumstances, it's likely that when those properties pass to you, the cost basis will become whatever their market value is on the day that you inherit them.
And I plan to keep them both as rental properties. I'm 58, and I figured, if I have 2 rental properties, that's passive income that will help me in retirement.
Yep. Amen. I like rental properties. They are good sources of income as long as I've said this before, but me and my husband, we actually do own rental properties as part of our investments, but he is a contractor and he deals with the tenants. So if it were just up to me, I would not want to deal with tenants and I would not want to deal with repairs. So I would look for other sources of income. But if you're in that camp and you can do that, then they do provide some great opportunity.
Folks, for a moment here, especially, if you're a young person and you're thinking, oh man, I'm interested in purchasing a home, or I'm interested in perhaps that idea of having a rental property like Shana just mentioned with that last caller. Let's start with the rental properties there, because that's one that we've that comes up considerably at a consistent basis on our show. Dan used to talk about it. Dan was a rental property owner as well as, Shana is too, as you just heard her mention. A couple things to consider, folks, I think is really important is number one, just what Shana said there. There is certainly a wonderful benefit to being a landlord in that you get the opportunity for that passive income. It comes in every month, hopefully. The downside of it is being a landlord, meaning you have to be ready to accept a call at 2 o'clock in the morning from your tenant who says, hey, my toilet's backed up, and it's on you.
So the plus is being a landlord. The downside is being a landlord.
Exactly right. The plus is being a landlord. Downside is being a landlord. If the washer or dryer goes, it's on you. And not only that, but it's a little bit different from if you're in your own home. It's just you who it impacts. This actually impacts someone else, and so you are now. There's a little bit of that business relationship too there. It's not for everybody. It's not for the faint of heart. That's just something to consider there. Certainly if you have the opportunity to do something like that, maybe if you have a separate property on your home or you have a detached garage or something like that, it definitely could be something for you to consider. That's the first thing though, is the potential headaches of being a landlord. The second is this question, and this is the most important question I think for anyone who wants to be a landlord. Can you carry the property, the rental property, without rent coming in? If you can carry it without rent, and I'm not saying you carry it for eternity, but you need to be able to say, I can carry this property with the potential that there's not going to be a renter in there paying for it, paying the mortgage or paying for whatever else. That's an important question to ask because the reality is stuff happens. You might have to, God forbid, kick someone out of your apartment, or you might just be in a spot where, I'm not able to find someone to come into it right now. You have to be able to carry it during those times. So can you carry the property without that income coming in for 5 months or 6 months while you're looking for someone to fulfill that? I think those are really the important questions there. And then Shana mentioned too, her husband is a contractor. He knows his stuff. I think that's another good question to ask too, is am I handy enough to fix this stuff if it breaks, or can I pay someone to do it? Do I have the money to be able to pay someone to be able to fix it and fix it somewhat immediately? So I think those are all good things to consider, specifically when we're talking about rental properties, but could be a very good part of your investment portfolio. Now, also part of your investments, but in a different way, I think, is home ownership in general. Sam and I were talking about this before the show, how, home ownership is an investment in some ways, but it is quite different from your portfolio investments, for example, from investing in equities or ETFs or mutual funds. I think just, some experience. I'm a homeowner myself, and I think overall it's wonderful. I think there's something very dignifying to having your own property where you can say, hey, you know what, this is mine. I pay rental. I pay property tax on it. I'm not sure why we do that. We have to pay tax to own our own land, but that's the way it is.
Don't even get me going on it, Seth. I could go for hours.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So it is a joy. There are also some headaches for it too. Sam and I were talking about this also. I sometimes look back very longingly on the days where I was renting, and if for example, my pipes burst like they did recently, I could have just called my landlord and say, hey, I need new pipes, and it's his job to take care of it. Not so when you're a homeowner. It's up to you. You got to figure it out. You got to either fix it or pay someone to do it, just like if it's a rental. So there's wonderful parts about it. I think also, and Sam, you might be able to speak. I know you're renting right now, and there's certainly some advantages to doing that as well.
Oh, exactly. I think especially among young, right-leaning people, conservative people, we believe in life, liberty, and property.
That's right.
So there can be a little bit of pressure from our own section of the culture to say, you need to buy a house right now.
Yeah.
Well, listen, man, if it's not economically feasible to do it, it's not for me at the moment. I'm a single guy. There's not even particularly a reason to do it. I think you got to go with what's best for you and not let those voices crowd into your head, because as Seth said, there are quite a few advantages to it as well. I remember Dan got a caller, I think it was a while ago, saying, what's with these millennials? They're not buying houses, they're renting. And Dan basically said, good for them. If they want to rent, if that's what's best for them, do it. Why not? You know? They don't have to mow their lawn if that's part of the deal. They don't have to fix their stuff. They can put more stuff in savings and investments.
so if that's where you're at right now, take the blessings that come along with it.
Yeah, there is something to be said with being content where you're at. Not satisfied so that you're never improving, but being content where you're at. You know, if you got a roof over your head, man, be thankful for it. Absolutely. And that goes for me as well, as someone who now is a homeowner and loves the place that I'm at, and also at times has been tempted to look back longingly on where I was from with renting. It's just a good reminder to be content with where you are. And ultimately, folks, it comes down to this. Your castle has been stewarded to you. Be a good steward of it. Absolutely. Be a good steward of that. I'm a big fan of trying to pay down that mortgage as quickly as possible, but being able to do it in a way that you can live within your means, for sure. And that's one of those we've talked often on our show about different types of debt that might not be the worst to get into. A mortgage could be one of them because it's an appreciating asset. All that stuff to consider, folks. That's good stuff. If you've got questions, follow-up questions about this conversation, you can always call into our live show every day. You can talk to Shana about this, 9:05 Eastern Time. And we hope to see you next time for more financial issues. Until then, remember, it's all His. Let's be found good and faithful stewards. God bless.
If we ever forget that we're one nation under God, then we will be a nation going under.
Thank you for joining us. This has been an FISM.